Hey guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about slopes of lines. And you learned a little bit about this in algebra, but we'll come back and visit it now. Okay, so what is slope? Slope is the steepness of a line. Okay, slope is the steepness of a line. Okay, and you can write slope in a lot of different ways. Okay, and I would write all these down. First one would be change in y over change in x. You could write it as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's your slope formula that we'll use here in a little bit. Hey, and another one that you could use that you're probably most familiar with is rise over run. Okay, you used that extensively last year. Okay, so we're going to use these different things to find the slope of each of the line in the little figure below. Okay, so let's start with line AB. Okay, we want to find the slope of that. Okay, so we're finding this guy. And we know that the rise from A to B would be 0. And the run would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay, so we know that 0 divided by 5 would be 0. Now you should remember that a horizontal line has a slope of 0. Okay, let's try AD this time. AD. Okay, so in AD we'll do our rise over run again. To go from A to D, or from D to A, you would rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you would run 0 times. Well, if you take 6 divided by 0, you can't do that. It's undefined. Now you should remember that a vertical line, the slope is always going to be undefined. Okay, and lastly, let's do AC. Okay, we can do our rise, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, a rise of -5, and a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so your slope should be a negative slope of -5/6. Okay, so you should be familiar with this. It's stuff that you've seen before, nothing new at all. Okay, this time it says we want to use the slope formula to determine the slope of JK through 3, 1 and 2, -1. So remember, our slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're simply going to plug those values in. You have x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, so let's do y2 minus y1. So we have -1 minus 1 over 2 minus 3. Okay, so if you have -1 minus 1, that would give you a -2. And 2 minus 3 would give you a -1. So if you go ahead and reduce, those negatives cancel out, and 2 divided by 1 gives you 2. So your slope from those to get from one point to the next in that problem would be 2. Okay, so make sure you have those few problems down. We're going to be using a slope quite a bit, so make sure you have it down. All right. Okay, so when you're talking about slope, you're talking about several different types. Okay, you have 4 different types. The first one being positive slope. So if you have a line that's sloping upward, it's a positive slope. Your negative slope obviously slants downward. Your 0 slope is horizontal, and your undefined slope is vertical. And we've talked about all these before. Okay, just review. All right, it says, Justin is driving from home to his college dorm at 4 p.m. he is 260 miles from home. At 7 p.m., he is 455 miles from home. Use the graph of the line that represents Justin's distance, and we want to find the slope of that line. Okay, so our two ordered pairs are 4, 260, and 7, 455. Okay, and we can go ahead and plug that into our slope formula. So we got x1, y1, and x2, y2. And we want to plug it into y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we have 455 minus 260 over 7 minus 4. Okay, and if you go ahead and reduce that, 455 minus 260 would give you 195. And 7 minus 4 is obviously 3. And then if you continue to reduce that, 195 divided by 3 would give you a slope of 65. Okay, so that would be your slope from those two different lines. Okay. Now, it says, what if we've used the graph to estimate how far Tony will have traveled by 6:30 p.m. if his average speed stays the same? All right, so we want to go ahead and plug our numbers in again. We have the ordered pairs 3, 180, and 5.5, 330. Okay, so we have 330 minus 180 over 5.5 minus 3. And if you go ahead and reduce that, that gives you 150 over 2.5 or 60. Okay, so your slope of this line would be 60, but we want to know how far Tony has traveled by 6:30 p.m. So if you look at your graph, by 6:30, you'll have traveled 6.5 hours. So we're going to take our slope and multiply that by 6.5. And if you do that, that would give you 390 total miles traveled by 6:30 p.m. Okay, so there's just a few more problems for you. Make sure you have those written down. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines, but before we do, got a joke for you. Do you know why diarrhea is hereditary? Think about it. Think about it. Because it runs through your genes. Gross. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about parallel and perpendicular lines slope. Okay, so you'll remember from last year, most likely. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, parallel lines have the same slope, whereas perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay, so make sure you get those two things down. Parallel lines have same slope, perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to graph all these ordered pairs and determine whether they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, so let's graph these points. We have 0, 2. Let's zoom in. 0, 2. And -1, -1. Okay, so that's our first line. And our second line is 3, 1. And -3, 3. Okay, so here's that. All right, so let's find the slopes of each. Hey, on this guy, we have a rise over run of 1, 2, 3, and a run of 1. So our slope of that guy would be 3. And our other guy, we have a slope of a rise of -2 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so -2 divided by 6, if you go ahead and reduce that, that is -1/3. And that you'll see when you compare these two different slopes that they are in fact opposite reciprocals. Remember, opposite reciprocals, you flip it over and change the sign. So these would be perpendicular. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, so this time our points are -3, -2, and 1, 2. -3, -2, and 1, 2. And your second points are -2, 4, and -2, 4, and 2, -4. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the slopes of these. Okay, so for the first one, you're going to have a rise of 1, 2, 3, 4, and a run of 1, 2, 3, 4. And 4 divided by 4 is 1, so there's your first slope. In our second one, you're going to have a rise of -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A rise of -8 and a run of 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so -8 divided by 4 gives you -2. Well, you'll see that one slope is 1, the other slope is -2. They're not the same and they're not opposite reciprocals. So these slopes have neither. All right. Okay, before we call it quits, I would like you to go ahead and try this one by yourself. See ya.